Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome to Office Hours, the January edition. I have calling it a PowerPoint is an insult to PowerPoint, so let's call it a picture that says, hey, this is Office Hours. In case you're confused, in case you showed up to this and you're like, why did I sign up? Well, let me tell you. You're here to learn about, in this specific instance, we're talking about some service AI stuff. I may bleed in and talk a little bit about UCP, which I know is not the focus, but if the conversation flows that way. And generally, what happens for office hours, give me a little sound check, Crystal. Can you hear me okay? Let me make sure I can say hi to you and you can say hi to me. Hi, Crystal.
Hello. Yes, I can hear you great.
What I'm going to do, because this is the first ever office hours we've done specifically on Service AI, it actually came about because I've talked to people that are using it. We have quite a few partners that are using Service AI. Some of them, interestingly, standalone. They don't have any other Cloud Radial stuff, so they're here specifically for that. But I'm here to answer questions and just generally talk about stuff. So I think my approach, and again, we keep these super casual, is I'm going to go through various sections of Service AI, talk about what it does, talk about what we've changed about it, give you some kind of backstory for it. And then at any point, if anything looks interesting, you have a question, any one of those things, you can always throw it in the chat. And then I'm hoping, Crystal, I can periodically stop and go, what do we think? And then you funnel some questions my way if that works for you. Hopefully that's amenable.
Yep, that works. Go ahead and drop your questions in the chat or in the Q&A, guys, and we'll try to get those answered.
Sweet. Okay, so if you've never been to an office hours, welcome. It's really pretty simple. We wanted a super clean, easy chat format because, again, short of having to book a bunch of time with me one-on-one, it's kind of a generalized thing, but it applies to Service AI or our client portal. Office hours is a place that you kind of show up to say, what's happening with this? What's changed? Why did you change it? Get some face-to-face time with people that more or less know the deal with stuff. Obviously a place to share your thoughts. A lot of times the way that this has worked in the past is people put their questions, we chat through it, I show it. Again, very informal, very honest, and just a place to pick your brain. It's a flowing conversation. But if it comes down to specific support, so let's say you're here because you have Service AI, you're interested, or maybe you don't, maybe you're just peeking around. I'm not going to stop on a webinar and unfortunately be able to access your tenant to help out. So hopefully I can give you an idea. Hopefully I can answer your questions, problems, give you tips and everything like that. But if there is a specific need that you have with your tenant in office hours, we talk about, again, a lot of very specific stuff. In Service AI, we're going to talk about things like rules or triage and stuff like that. If you want some help with that, the best place is probably support. But in this case, if you're doing Service AI onboarding, chances are you're doing it with me because well, I'm not the only one, but I am the primary person doing them. So just keep in mind that I'm not going to be able to stop and show that stuff. But again, hopefully you get some good ideas. We can always talk about that stuff specifically, again, if you're going through an onboarding with myself, Nick, or Jared. And let's cover our agenda, which again is only two things. Talk about some updates, talk about the gist of it, and then get to chatting. So generally, we book these for an hour. If we don't have that many questions, I don't need to keep you guys hostage. I'll show you kind of how it flows. So because it's the very first one, I'm going to do kind of a skim version for the first like 10, 15 minutes over what it is. Again, I'm doing this specifically because I know that some people that are here told me they would show up here to kind of give their team or people an idea of what Service AI is, what the purpose is, how it fits into their ecosystem, and what we're building towards. Again, questions along the way, super welcome. And again, Crystal, I'll give you ample time at various sections that I feel to go through them. So yeah, let's talk about some Service AI stuff. Now, the majority of this is going to be screen share while I just kind of chit chat over it. But Service AI is a tool specifically for really it's AI help desk understanding and training. And we basically have a need. We talk to a lot of MSPs, obviously being our primary market, and they tell us that, hey, we want to get AI into the service desk as a concept. Now, that can mean a million different things. Does that mean having the AI straight up answer people? Does that mean having AI, crawl around and figure out best ways to do stuff based off historical data? Does that mean, coaching opportunities and seeing where a process can be improved? It's a really broad statement that we have, but Service AI was developed from the ground up to kind of help give MSPs a path to approach AI. So again, whether that is um, in kind of analytics, whether that's in direct assistance, whether that's in manipulation of tickets itself. That's the three main ways we talk about it. So even when I teach Service AI, obviously I know I'm sharing a screen with a bunch of dashboards and numbers. There's really only three use cases you can use it for conceptually, and we talk about all three during the onboardings, and I'll kind of start with the big picture. So if we're trying to approach AI in the service desk and you purchase a tool like Service AI, what is that supposed to do? Well, first of all, the fundamentals of how Service AI works is it hooks up to your existing PSA system. Is that a mandatory? It is, because what we're doing is we are basically taking the same model as like a Claude or a ChatGPT or a Gemini or you name your favorite AI, and what those things do is they're trained on general sets of data, right? Maybe OpenAI, which is ChatGPT, right? They pointed at a whole bunch of documents and open web search, and it crawls a bunch of stuff. The usefulness all starts from understanding how you operate, because what AI is really good at is pattern recognition. It's good at understanding what needs to be done, but it needs to be fed a lot of stuff. And the core rule with any AI, not just Service AI, is garbage in, garbage out. You give it junk, it will spit out junk. You do not want this tool if you're going to feed it junk. So what does that look like at the very beginning? So even right off the bat, if you're looking at it or you're familiar with it, this is one of the first changes. This happened last night. So again, if you're familiar with Service AI and you're already nodding off, pay attention because this is important. So what we've done is we've allowed you to connect, obviously, your PSA system. Even in my example, I'm connected to ConnectWise. And then what we're doing is to try to give us the best source of information. So if you want those sweet, sweet analytics and you want the AI to be able to help resolve tickets, help technicians resolve tickets, and eventually, which we'll talk about shortly as well, helping end users self-service, you're going to need to have the best possible trainable data. So not only are we connecting to your PSA, which is important, but we're learning from areas that you point us to. So again, in ConnectWise's case, a lot of PSAs work like this. Some have exceptions, but more or less, this is how Service AI works across the board. We're pointing it in this case at one board. It's bringing in those tickets from that board, and we are back syncing, is what we call it, tickets from a certain date. Now, what that does is it builds a big database, right? Depending on how many tickets you have from whatever boards or queues or whatever, into a localized database that exists only for your account. We are not learning from it. We never want to, there's no master controller that we're all gathering your data, big brother. Nope. This exists specifically for you, and we're letting the AI kind of crawl and analyze your data. That's the foundation of this entire concept. Now, when we have that information, like even in my example tenant, I only have 132 tickets. What we can start to do is branch out and really be useful. So one of the first things you're going to notice if you're using Service AI is you basically hook up your PSA and then numbers start appearing. And this is a very common thing I like to stop and kind of discuss because it's a lot of the things that MSPs are looking for, which is how do you quantify but also, qualitatively score data. Well, what we did is we came up with these RPS scores. They're called relative performance scores. And what these do is they basically look at different facets of the information that we receive very specifically with a bunch of prompts and information behind them. So when I have this 6.7 ticket RPS, fundamentally what the AI is doing is it's ingesting a conversation from a ticket. It's reading the notes, the back and forth public notes between the technicians and the clients that you're supporting, which is why, again, picking the right boards, queues, the juiciest content is important. And then the AI is basically being prompted to try to understand the conversation, and it's being asked simultaneously of like, hey, do you understand what's happening in here? Meaning that, and this is, if you've done an onboarding with me, you've heard me say this a million times. If you feed it garbage, it's going to spit out a really bad score. And what garbage looks like to an AI isn't necessarily garbage to real life, right? Garbage to an AI would be a ticket that comes in saying, I have X problem, and a technician saying, I have Y resolution or just solved. That may suffice for ticket deflection, for getting that ticket off your back. Nobody's learning from it, and the AI certainly isn't. So that would result in a really bad RPS for tickets. If it's a nice, thorough response where the technician says, hey, no problem, Billy, here's everything I've done to troubleshoot XYZ issue, and the issue is now resolved, and Billy comes back and says, thank you so much. That's a great RPS because that's a really clear communication as to what happened. And if you're kicking the tires, or even if you think about how to approach AI by itself, that's a really important thing to understand. So before we get into all the crazy fancy solve my tickets and do this, again, AI is not magic. It's not going to be able to solve anything if you don't teach it how to solve stuff. And again, Web search can only take you so far. Your clients, your processes, your documentation is the best way to get it fed initially. So when you first hook up Service AI, do not be alarmed or scared or hurt if you have abysmal RPSs, especially for your tickets, because chances are you didn't really need to have fantastic ticket notes before. But as we shift to an age where AI is getting more useful, it's getting more interesting, and people are really quickly figuring out the gimmick part of it versus the useful part, you want to feed it good data. So again, we'll talk about shortly what it looks like to go from something not so great to something useful and how you might change your processes. That's a common thing we talk about with Service AI. And then the other stuff that's a lot quicker is basically the agents. So the technician scores, this is looking at a technician and saying, how are they doing? Now, when it looks at a technician score, in this case across the entire desk, it's looking at all of my techs answering tickets and asking itself, based on what I can see, are these technicians answering empathetically? Do they understand what's going on? Do they ask a bunch of nonsense? Do they tell people to shut up, right? If they're rude and they're short, even if they answer questions and they solve tickets all day, you're not going to get a good RPS for an agent. But if you're doing your very, very best and they're really out there in the fields, not necessarily just putting good notes, but actually being human beings, ironically, that's going to result in a better agent RPS. And again, there's a lot of sub-facet breakdowns that we can get into. And then users is your pulse. Because again, I know a lot of MSPs and especially service desk managers, they don't have time to go learning every single user profile of people you support. But you generally want to pulse on who's hard to support, who's always unhappy, who's never really thrilled with what you do versus who is. And immediate ramifications of that means that you can at least tell if you are throwing good technicians to bad users, if you have a trouble client. And future ramifications also means that like you can quickly spot if you have consistently high user RPSs for certain companies, that starts to open up the conversation of like, well, hey, maybe they're a good candidate for testing, right? Maybe you want to put the first AI iterations in front of them, or maybe you want to give them a little extra love or whatever have you. There's a lot of ways to interpret it. I could talk about these scores all day because they're basically the foundation of the entire product, short of triage, which we'll talk about as well. Why are they the foundation? Because if we understand this model and how we approach learning where we need to start, so this is way fundamental stuff, that unlocks the breakdown for everything in the future. And I do this on pretty much every service AI call I do. You get that idea of how the overview of the service desk is. If I go pick a ticket deep inside of my ticket list here, so let's go pick this one that was opened a while ago. We are approaching every single bit of information with that same mentality. So when I look at a ticket, I am giving it an individual automation score, ticket RPS. I'm giving it an individual account of how the technician did. I'm giving it an individual account of how the user behaved during that ticket. And it's through these conversations and this understanding that we are building these scores. So again, in this case, it's got a decent RPS, could be a little better. The technician did well, specifically because Ralph is asking stuff, John's responding. Again, the back and forth, and it's basically looking at every single conversation for you. And this little bit of unit is what is contributing to the big main score up here. So again, we'll talk about these and how they affect everything else, but this is my first stopping point to make sure everybody has a good understanding of RPSs and how they kind of affect everything. Crystal, I see 14 different chat messages. Maybe not all of them merit a response because they might just be like, hello, but anything I need to answer at this point, or should I keep moving?
You were right there, all just hellos and things like that. So you're good. Keep on going.
Awesome. Okay, so where does this leave us? So if we understand where we're getting the information, well, you're giving us the information. That's your information from your tickets and whatnot. What are we doing with it? Before you've done anything useful, well, maybe this is useful to you, we've scored it. So at this point, like I mentioned, there's three things you can go forth and accomplish with Service AI. And this is where the onboardings really begin. So if you start with Service AI and you kind of benchmark yourself, what do you want to do? Well, again, what's important to you? Do you want to start immediately getting AI to help out on your tickets? That's one option. That's triage. Especially that's unfortunately it's only available for ConnectWise and Autotask. So I don't mean to leave my other PSAs out to hang, but that's an API thing. At least I believe we can probably develop more, but that was our proof in the pudding. We'll talk about that in a sec. The second use case again is for analytics. That's available to everybody because we're crawling the data universally. And then the third one is technician assistance is generally what I call it, which is how do you like weaponize a technology like this for good, right? How do you actually take the information that an AI might understand and use it to assist a technician in answering tickets better, faster, more succinctly? I mean, like there's a lot of different ways we can do it. So whatever path you have, I'll get triage out of the way because again, it probably affects the least amount of people, although it is very useful. So again, if you have Autotask or ConnectWise, what we're doing with triage is we are basically looking at the information you gave us with your PSA, but there's a separate section which you can hook it up. And when you hook up triage, it's a very, very simple AI triage tool. We're not trying to compete with there's some dedicated tools out there, I believe. This is not that. This is a really, really clean, easy way to get started with some AI triage. And what we're really doing is we are taking your tickets, and I want to focus not even on all the stuff, but specifically on the field updates. And you are telling us what you want it to do for you. So, do you want the AI to specifically update your subject, right? Maybe you have tickets that come in that just say like help or printer or server or something like that. That's not very useful, but there's more meat in the description. Well, typically you have a dispatcher or a triager or whatever you want to call them, somebody that takes the time to look at tickets, interpret them, be the client whisperer, fix that stuff up and send it back out. Well, AI is perfectly good at doing the mundane stuff like that. That's where we come in and we can have it again update your subject or your type and your subtype, your item, your priority, you name it. So the idea here is that we are basically letting the AI run loose on picking its best guess of what you have available to choose from. And the way it works is whether it's Autotask or ConnectWise, fundamentally the same thing. You point it at a board or a queue, multiple if you like. You can give it a spam destination. So if you have stuff that you get a lot of junk, you can have it chuck stuff into spam. And you can also have it, of course, ignore tickets, meaning that like if you get, you're having a look at my Azure support board, I have a bunch of RMM alerts or backup alerts. I don't want it bothering with those. I can tell it to ignore it. And the reason this is sweet is because this is the entire page. There's no more customization options. If I add it and ignore rule, it's actually a prompt. So basically you can just plain text say, don't touch my RMM stuff, don't touch my Huntress tickets, don't touch my threat locker alerts, whatever. And then it won't. And then all you do is you let it run. And the really cool thing is a lot of times people approach this with skepticism, which you should. AI is really not perfect, but it's pretty good and it can be really helpful. Why do I say that? Well, because people always like to start it in test mode. What does test mode do? If you're giving this a spin and you're trying to figure out how an AI tool can really help your service desk, again, practically, we're not talking about analytics or assistance yet, which I would argue is more useful in the long run, but you're looking for that short term, let's get to it. You throw it on, you put it in test mode, and then what Service AI is going to do is it's going to take a look at the specific tickets that are going to come in, and it's going to, again, in test mode especially, show you the audit log of what it did, what happened, what it received, if it determined it as spam, and it's pretty good at catching spam. If you gave it routing rules, so in this case, it's like somebody is doing an offboarding, you want to be able to have it choose to say if you've got a rule saying, David is our offboard onboard guy, tickets should be assigned to him. It would have said it here. Checks for duplicates to make sure that it's not stepping all over itself and you don't have a bunch of dupes. And then again, it's making its best pick of the actual stuff. Now, between me and you guys, because this is office hours and I'm not trying to sell you stuff, I'm just trying to talk. The only field that I've seen be hilariously, terribly wrong repeatedly is time. I don't know. Maybe it's related to the fact that AI sucks at math, but um, no different here. I think I can stand up here and be pretty honest and confident in telling you that it'll do a damn good job at figuring out what the best categories are for stuff. Why it decided that an offboarding takes 186 and point 0.2 hours is your guess as good as mine? Probably. I don't know. We're going to have to talk to Sam Altman and figure out what's going on with AI these days, but that's the only one that comes back with hilariously incorrect. You can train it, but that's it. The cool thing though is you can basically see that it does a pretty good job at taking the ticket, feeding it up. It receives the information from your PSA of what's available. And this took 3.91, let's round up to 4 seconds to receive a ticket, make its best guesses. And theoretically, again, we didn't make any changes. So it says no changes applied. Fix that up. So why this is really cool, even before we get into the super awesome stuff that AI and how this tool can work, at the very base level, you can look at this one too. This ticket originally said help. Again, the AI looked and said, hey, it was a non-functional HP desk printer. So what did it do? It changed it from help to immediate assistance because it recognized it was a critical issue. The body really said that the issue was nuts. Printer, break fix, priority two, quick response. Again, does it take 5 hours to fix a printer? I doubt it, but I don't know. And then it came back and fixed it in 7 seconds, right? It would have given that answer. And if we go back and actually explore that ticket, we can see the gist of what actually came through. So again, this is a really neat way to turn it on. And like I sometimes do this within my first call in my onboardings. Within 10 seconds, I get people going like, all right, I'll figure out this whole analytic shtick. Let's get this thing doing something now. And you can see that this is how it helps. So pretty cool and a really easy way to get into it. Again, this is office hours. I'm here to talk about the dirties. I'm not here to talk about a demo or sell you on stuff. So why did we do this? This comes up a lot too, because originally, if you look back, Service AI has only been around since, I think it was October 1st, 2025. We didn't launch with triage. That was not a feature that you would have found on the website. In fact, if you're kind of tangentially aware and you're joining this office hours to figure out, that was never mentioned. Why did we tack it on? Well, the reality is, again, back to our main use case, our big picture vision was to help technicians and service desk managers answer those tickets better. And AI does a really bad job of trying to run assistance on a ticket called help or broken or immediate assistance required. It doesn't know what to do. So triage actually started and evolved from a cheat way for us to basically fix our own data to give you better outputs. But as a result, pretty cool technology, very simple. Again, now that we're back to triage, you kind of know how it fits and why it fits. So yes, it does those things. It makes its best guesses. If we're talking about practical applications of how this works, you let it run for a bit in test mode, could be 10 tickets, 50 tickets, whatever. You basically see how it responds. And like we just did, if I come back into triage and I say, you know what, I did a pretty good job at figuring out that this was break fix, but actually break fix is wrong. Break fix should only be for tickets related to anything but printers. I have specifics, I have corrections. Well, ironically, the best way to think about something like triage is to think about it like a human being. Think about it like you just hired a new guy and his job is just triaging and or filling in the information, again, like a dispatcher. In fact, in actual onboardings I do, typically the person that looks at this and fixes it is the dispatcher. It's basically the dispatcher, instead of having to do it manually, just gets a bot that does it for them, and they are the puppet master of the bot, which is a pretty cool upgrade, I think. So if you notice that it's making mistakes or you have notes and corrections, this is where you do it. Again, it's super simple. You come in and say, you know what, I actually want my tickets to route this way if they come in like this, or I want my type, subtype, item, priority treated like this, right? Again, you're treating it like a human being. So there's not the specific mapping rules. You can literally come in and say, tickets from this company are immediately high priority. Tickets of this type go to this subtype. Stuff like that is totally fair game. So we took a very simple approach of just like, let's just prompt it. And it works really well. Again, I've had this working with a whole bunch of partners, and the level of simplicity compared to the output is really promising, which is why I typically start here. But let's go back to the top level view of how this feeds the greater vision of Service AI. Again, a good pausing point. I only saw one more chat pop up, but Crystal, anything I need to answer, or should I keep rolling through? What do you think?
Well, Joanne asked a question. So it is works with ConnectWise and Autotask now, but do you expect functionality with Halo in the future?
I do. I think Halo specifically is a great call because Halo, of all the PSAs, I mean, it's the newest, really. It has some of the best APIs that we've seen. So, like, make no mistake, it's not like we have this favoritism. The only real reason that we go for Autotask and ConnectWise first is because UCP, the client portal that we have, separate product, same family, has the majority of clients from those two PSAs. So it's not like a preferential thing that we hate Halo or hate other PSAs. It's typically we just facilitate whatever our guinea pigs are willing to work on, and it just so happened that the sample size. So I'm really pretty confident that this functionality is because it's a proof in the pudding for those two. I don't see any issues with it with Halo. I'm not super sure about the other ones like BMS and Synchro, just because I'd have to ask our development team what that looks like. But Halo, I would think that we could probably recreate this pretty quick. I don't know if that's something that they're interested in doing immediately because I'll talk about what I know they're working on right now, but that's where we're at with it. So good question. Halo's a good one. Um, Again, you're gonna have to interrupt me, Crystal, because I will keep rolling. So if something comes up again, they're like, wait, follow up.
I
Right.
will.
I'll keep steamrolling. Okay, so triage out of the way. What affects everybody? This is again totally agnostic of any PSA. So with the triage thing as a maybe, the next practical thing you want to do with AI stuff is again figure out where you are. So if triage can help clean stuff up, awesome, but that's not going to do the meat of the work. It's not really going to help you resolve tickets faster. It's not going to help you figure out the data that you have and the bigger problems. So how do we attack that problem? Well, let's talk about the number one thing that typically gets people interested in service AI or an AI-like tool, because again, I've seen a lot of these come out and more or less the approach is the same. It's to take what you have and again, summarize it and regurgitate it and clean it up and give it to a technician. Why is that important? Well, it's kind of lame in my tenant because I only have 132 fake tickets. These are generated BS ones and I only have 51 articles. So I kind of breezed over it. But again, we're building that database, we're building that knowledge off of your tickets. So the more intellectual property, historical archive data you have in those tickets, the more valuable it is for technicians. But then you run into a human being problem. If you've got 30,000 tickets, 10,000, 3,000, 70,000, a lot, and you have answers in there, bits and pieces, you have pieces of the puzzle scattered across a ton of tickets, a human being is not going to be able to crawl those. They can use search, they can try to figure it out through inside of the PSA, but realistically, they can't. You multiply that difficulty by sparse documentation. So you might have documentation all over the place. You might have, your IT glue docs or your Hoodoo, or you have stuff thrown on SharePoint or in the PSA documentation systems that has that one password or the one process and how to access their VPN or whatever it is. Again, now you have technicians that are trying to solve problems that have been solved many times before, documented all over the place. So how do you pull that together? Well, the goal for Service AI is to build that big database, right? For documentation's sake, again, like I kind of breezed over it, you can add different types of documentation in here that will, again, enrich it. So again, the more popular one that we get a lot of, because a lot of people use it, is IT Glue. We pull in articles from there. Again, Hoodoo is supported. And again, the built-in PSA systems are supported. We even have a way to ingest, and I'll talk about it, or not ingest, but add in articles from any source just to build up the internal brain. The point is that by putting all that information inside of one system and even the articles, what then happens practically is we can test and see if the AI is able to take resources across tens of thousands of tickets and serve it up to a tech in a second. That's the biggest value that people come to it for because that's the biggest problem they have. So again, it's not so much your senior techs that have all the smart stuff in their noodles, it's the junior techs that are having trouble scaling up. And we're seeing that societally, right? AI is causing this massive divide between people that know and then people that don't. And then people that do know, they keep it all to themselves. They work with their stuff. People that don't know don't get a shot, right? So again, a new technician does not have that intellectual property and they're not going to have the chance to scour through 30,000 tickets. So what do? You need them productive on day one. How are you going to do that? Well, again, that's why the ticket note quality is so important. So why did I pull up this AI chat sandbox? This is how the proof in the pudding works. So again, why I brought up that my tenant is lame, because I only have 132 tickets to pull from of fake info. Same thing with these 51 articles of generic info. In real implementations, we have a lot more powerful stuff because you've got a lot more historical data, but you can imagine what this is doing as a whole. So let's just do this. I'm going to come in and say, okay, I want a question, right? A theoretical question, like an end user did it. And let's say the end user puts in a query that says, I don't know, my printer is broken. That's my go-to one. I wish I had something more interesting, but it really works the same way more or less across everything. So I'm going to explain what's going to happen before I do it, because this is literally the meat and potatoes of Service AI. When you are asking it a question here, you are specifically throwing this against an AI who is referencing primarily your tickets, secondarily your articles, and tertiary is web search. So actually, I'll use something a little different. Printer's broken is boring to me. I'll say my Adobe Outlook. No, that's not a program. What? Acrobat isn't working. Now, Let's break this down as a prompt. That's a terrible prompt. There's no information here. I don't know what you're on, web, program, Mac, Windows, who knows? You're going to see what's happening. It goes through the tickets, it goes through the articles, it checks its own response, it evaluates it, make sure that it's not in gibberish, and it spits something out. Now, again, what it's doing right now with zero customization, it is throwing out the answer, it is summarizing something. Chances are, I mean, I know for a fact that I don't typically have documentation for every single little nitty-gritty thing. So again, in practical terms, I'm not expecting MSPs to have documents on how Adobe works or Outlook works or Excel works or proprietary programs. That's why it's kind of a mishmash of how it formats the information. But this is an example of a user prompt going directly to the AI and the AI doing its best. Now, the interesting thing is not just the chat GPT-ism of it where it gives you a response. The stuff you pay money for is this, everything on the right-hand side. Why? Because what it's doing here is it is evaluating its response. Basically, there is a system of pretty advanced confidence intervals behind the scenes that it is looking at the response it gave, looking at what it had available for information, and judging whether it is pretty confident, yes, kind of confident, or not confident as to what it did. And I'll zoom in because it's kind of tiny text here, but you can literally see that it says yes, partially no, evaluated by the AI. And if we look back down at these tickets, we'll get to this missing data insight. The reason it's doing that is because it is pulling in related tickets that had to do, in this case, with Adobe, sourcing those as like, is there anything I could find from those? Sourcing in related articles. Now, it found one article that I used as an example a while ago, but it's specifically for Mac. So even though it matched pretty well, I didn't say I was on a Mac, so is that really going to fix my issue? It's not super sure. So it came back with a big fat partially. It goes, maybe this would have helped. Now, the more information you feed it, so in practical terms, the better your tickets, the better your ticket history and the notes and everything else, the more you have it, garbage in, garbage out. So the better information you have, the better response you get. But if you don't have that, right? And this is typically where we start to figure out how to improve an AI, because a lot of times people go like, how do I make those ticket RPS scores go up? How do I make the responses better? How do I get this to a technician? What are you asking me here, Ricky? I'm asking you to put in good notes, teach the AI not through what it says, but what you say. So in an actual real life scenario, if a person put in this ticket and you were to give Service AI a chance to answer and it comes back with this and you go, that's pretty good. And you answer this, right? You paste that back in there, however you want to do it. And then the user comes back and says, that didn't work. And you basically use this as practically like a chat GPT or Claude or whatever AI you like, exactly the same way you work through the problem, but this has the benefit of not only having the web search, but also having the ability to reference history. Well, again, now you have a little buddy that is looking at 30,000 tickets plus your documentation instantly to serve up the answer. So that's why it's so important to have a good backsync of data, have good relevant information to feed it. And let's say you don't. So let's say in this case, I genuinely don't have something. I'm not going to use Adobe. I'm going to do a different prompt because I want to show kind of the correlation of how a brand new prompt would work. So let's do one. I happen to use Camtasia. I record a lot of videos. A lot of them are tutorials for Cloud Radial stuff. So I know for sure I haven't asked it that. I'm going to say my Camtasia is frozen. If you don't know what Camtasia is, it's a screen recording app, a lot of little video editing and stuff. Again, I for sure don't have any tickets or anything related to this. So now it's going to scramble. It's going to look at web search and it shouldn't come back with much, right? Zero. I mean, it's like 20% interval of confidence. This is not sure. It generally gives me milk toast, generic advice. I don't know what Camtasia is. On Windows, you can kind of close it via Task Manager or like run it in safe mode. This is hallucination crap. We don't want that going out in real life. It's not the AI's fault per se, but this is what happens when you feed it nothing and or garbage. So what do you do? In this case, it's telling you, it's saying like, you know what? I'm not confident. I could be confident. Why don't you let me build you something? Now, AI is going to suggest some stuff and you can always override it. So a lot of times what happens is if you have severely lacking documentation, your ticket bodies are not good, there's not a lot of juice to get out of it. This is where you come in and say like, all right, I will now teach it. So by itself, this is a pretty key part of Service AI. allowing it to generate stuff. It's going to try to find any article tangentially related in any capacity. In my case, Camtasia, I know I don't have any tickets on this, so it's kind of BS in me looking for tickets and articles, but it's trying to find any bit of information that it can that may be relevant. I could wipe all this out if I wanted to, and I could replace it with my own prompt, right? This is where, honestly, being a good prompt writer in general really helps you use Service AI pretty well. You could also point it, like if I had my Camtasia, let's see, Camtasia support, right? There's a lot of stuff that's made by TechSmith. So here's the TechSmith stuff. If I pointed it at its own resource library, I could go in here and say, like, go figure out from the Academy or whatever, consider the stuff they have as resources and feed it in. I don't like to do that just because I want to make sure that we're seeing it at its worst, which is a lot of times you're just going to hit generate and just mash that. So the point of me doing this is I want to showcase how it kind of works to boost the AI's intelligence as a whole. And what it does here is it basically teaches itself. So it's going through and it found some stuff going like, okay, here is the specific reasons freezing might happen. Here's some stuff that you want to check to make sure you can actually run it. Here are specific instructions for Camtasia rather than telling me task manager stuff. And again, I can come in and update it or fix it or give it additional context as I want. So I show this to say, like, we can generate these documents on the fly. AI generated documentation can be dangerous. It's kind of like teaching, again, it's like crap generating crap if you don't watch it. So what you want to do is generally look at where it found this information. Again, that's why the sources and everything else are better. It's usually pretty good about public information. Like there's tons of stuff on TechSmith, Camtasia, or Outlook or Adobe or whatever. But if it's a proprietary piece of software or something else that there's not an easy blog or whatever can find, this is where it pays to write your own and feed it. The point I'm trying to take away though is that by having it teach itself, right? I can put it in the internal brain and that will enrich itself. Or if I have a supported connected documentation system, I can also create the document, clean it up or whatever, and push it and pull, right, at the same time from my documentation system. Doesn't really matter. What I'm really trying to say is I can make my AI smarter. And by doing this, I now gave it information on how to troubleshoot Camtasia. It is always going to look at overlap. I don't want to write the same article a million different times because then that's going to be redundant. It's going to actually confuse the AI. So I don't want to see a math score of like 75, 80% saying you really wrote something very similar to this. Now, I do this demo a lot. So I always do this example of like troubleshooting whatever. So in this case, it's just saying like, yeah, you're troubleshooting some generic software or document or common performance. But in this case, it's very specific to TechSmith Camtasia. When I go back to that chat, right, and I go back to that exact same prompt, what I want to do is I want to rerun it. And I want to verify that the AI gives me better output. That's the most important, but also shows me that it understands that it found something relevant. And this is in a nutshell, how we make sure that it understands and learns really well. So again, now I'm asking the same exact thing, and I want much more specific instructions. So again, now it's not task manager. Now it's make sure does your system meet the requirements? Here's the stuff if you're on Windows or if you're on Mac, and I can talk to it. And you'll also notice that the evaluation response went from partially and not super sure to heck yeah, I'm sure. This is exactly what you want to do. And even the output, I don't spend a lot of time talking about it for this kind of stuff can be tweaked. So if you hate the way it responds and you want it to be much more conversational, you have full control on this. You can literally put in a rule at any point saying like, be warm, be friendly, give me a link, don't give me a link, talk to me in French, right? I have a couple of really cool Dutch people using the product and they have it talking and speaking back in Dutch. So it's interpreting everything in Dutch. And really it's like ChatGPT in that sense. But the point of this is how we start to build your IP. So you put good tickets in, you probably already get good answers. You don't get good answers. This is where we either a human being or the AI will flag itself as needing assistance and we go and enrich it. That's a general thing. And then I know we're not running out of time per se, but I'm getting kind of closer. So I'll shift a little bit to how this practically works for real tickets. But I saw Mike raise his hand. Hey, Mike. Any other stuff that you want me to address, Crystal? If not, I know Mike probably has a question out there that we should get to.
I am good on my side. So yeah, no questions
Unless
here.
Mike literally just raised his hand, in which case, hi, Mike. Um, that's the general idea. Now, again, in practice, So we have that triage stuff kind of organizing things. We have um, the ingestion of information and data scoring stuff, which again, we can run reports on. I'm not sure for office hours, it's tough to get really deep into this stuff. But you've seen how you can specifically approach a chat. And then we were using the sandbox kind of loosely. So I can ask it whatever and have that run against what I have trained. Now, again, in practice, what actually happens? So in practice, you see the technicians getting actual tickets, right? They're not going to be as cute or as nice as my XYZ is broken, please assist. Sometimes they're going to be messy. They're not going to have that great of information. So again, in this case, this is a ticket that says computer's running exceptionally slow. So what I can do is I can show you, even in this webinar, how the chat would interpret it. So I can click on a ticket and hit the sandbox. And again, now we're not talking about theory. Now we're going into a specific ticket, pulling it in, understanding it, and cross-correlating that with the information we have. So it's pulling in that first prompt of like, my computer's running really slow. What do I do? So it comes back specifically with answers to that problem. Again, the better notes we have, the better that problem's resolution is going to be. And in this case, we've beaten this horse to death with related tickets and related articles. So I should be very, very confident on how to troubleshoot this. Now, for again, my favorite PSAs and Zendesk, but for Autotask and ConnectWise, you get a little bit of a boost. This one back to our Halo question from earlier. I'm not sure if other PSAs support this in general. I know these two do, but if it's available, we'll get it in there. What we wanted to do is try to make the technicians focus on doing their job without having the uncomfiness of trying to get into Service AI and kind of side screen. Because like, yeah, you could pull up your PSA and kind of do one of these and go like, okay, here's the chat and here's this, and that's why this exists. So I was freehand typing stuff in. In theory, I could just plug in numbers and have it analyze stuff and go, oh, I picked up the information, I ran it there. But for those two PSAs, what we can do is we can actually frame Service AI in alongside the ticket. So again, practically speaking, I'll do a ConnectWise one as an example. So we have the ability to pull up a ticket, right? Let's do account locked out. That's a good one. And then what you're going to see is that Service AI is going to run alongside it. Same exact thing as running it in the chat sandbox. And it's going to give me an output just like it would actually inside of the sandbox. Now, in this case, we'll see if it does because we just updated this and I'll show you why as well. It should work. Otherwise, I'm going to look foolish. Actually, my boss literally told me right before this that he was working on this and it wouldn't work. So whoops. That's why I brought my backup. Autotask accomplishes the same exact thing. If you're watching this, Jeff, I know you told me. Whoops. I just literally forgot while I was in the webinar. My bad. Okay, let's look at a different one. Because really, it's the fundamental same thing. That AI chat sandbox explains how it works across everything. What you just saw, by the way, this is we're trying to improve the authentication process. Because a lot of times when you log in, you're logged in on the web. That's awesome. It retains it. Sometimes in the PSAs, it logs you out. We want to keep people logged in so they get that answer. So they're getting a little special treatment while we work on stuff. But here's an example. Again, this is an Autotask ticket. Just take away the mechanism. The mechanism is I have the Service AI stuff right here. I can pull it in and have it work just fine. Again, I'm not going to. It's the chat sandbox. You've seen it. Either way, having that response framed in means that a technician can get the exact same effect as typing in the answer, getting this just next to the ticket, which is way more comfortable. Again, that's what we wanted because we want a technician to be able to, again, I'm using the generic terms, but to chat GPT it right next to their ticket in kind of a safe environment that's referencing their database of information. That's all. The reason that that's also very comfy is because if it's framed in here, I can, as a technician, click myself, this response was helpful or not helpful. And we can actually see the comprehensive results of that. So what happens in real life is we have the technicians on the field reviewing the like GPT isms, right? They're seeing how the AI is helping them fetch answers and respond back and everything else. And when I look at that, even in the pod, I have this exact same capability. So a technician can see and rate the chat and then also see the related tickets and see the related articles and generally get a quick, like kind of a jump to, hey, instead of looking at 30,000 tickets, here's the key ones you want to look at, which is really, really helpful to solving the tickets ahead of time. And when they go in and rate it, that makes the most difference to me in my onboardings. And what you can see is that I have an evaluator column here. Again, the AI is going to assess itself every single time, but I don't care what an AI says. I care what a technician, human being says. So the way we actually get this out is we typically train it up. We sink in months, years of data, whatever, see how the output is, put it in front of a technician. And when they first start, they're basically just glancing at that output. They're testing the AI, seeing if it knows its stuff. If it knows its stuff, you're going to get back a lot of solveds, maybe some partialies, but pretty good. If it's just completely wrong, you're going to start saying not solved. And again, I trust a technician saying this was not good at all versus the AI much better because the technician is the one that eyeballed it. That's how we know as an implementer, as an improver, how far the AI is from being like really, really useful and ready. But really, what that tells you is from a service desk manager perspective is how ready this is for kind of mass scale deployment and how much training you need to do. So in theory, I would just pull up which one of my chats were not solved, why was it not solved, and can we fix it, right? Can we add rules, change chat rules, add more documents, write better notes about this? Again, include better documentation or supported stuff. Practically, what that means is you've got these scores that tell you the general idea of how you're doing. If the technicians take the responses that are being coached by Service AI, right? Because Service AI is writing this really kind of very professional, like, hi, I'm sorry to hear that you're having issue with XYZ. Here's what we could try. Here's what we've done, yada, yada. Then what happens is your ticket RPS goes up because the AI, same thing that technicians are honestly doing today, probably, right? They, instead of in the past where they would just Google an issue and summarize it and paste it in the notes, what they did or what they think they should do or what they're recommending to the client, technicians nowadays are just popping open Chat GPT and doing the exact same thing. So this is exactly that plus historical context. But by having that AI frame the notes better, organize it better, the AI is actually learning and teaching from itself. So you see an incremental growth, which means you also see the chats getting more useful. So hilariously, the system doesn't actually need that much maintenance. Obviously, I do my damnedest to give my forewarnings to people saying this is what it might look like. But the reality is, as long as you're putting in good notes, you don't need to do all that hubbub about putting in documentation, whatever. As I see this actually work with people, good notes are better juice and fuel than the documents in a practical sense. But the way you see if you're actually growing is I can visualize the growth of chat performance over time. So my demo environment, frankly, between me and you guys is kind of crappy because I don't have real data. But in real life scenarios, what I see with real people is that those that actually dedicate to making sure their techs are putting in good notes and keeping an eye on them start to see the performance change dramatically. So in this case, what we're doing is we're at a 22, meaning that 22% of the tickets are good. 22% of the queries came back really confident, really awesome. 76% of them came back so-so, and only 7 or 1.7% came back as like just wronged. If you put time and effort, if you flag the ones that are just crappy answers and you address them and have it rerun and make them correct, what you'll start to see is an actual growth in the performance. What that tells you, and this is the whole thing of Service AI, because remember, Service AI's point is to benchmark you and help coach you to an AI-able future. Service AI, I know I shouldn't say this at the 10 minutes before the webinar is over, is a tool for you guys. It's not for clients yet. Until this thing is bang on and it has learned the rules and it understands stuff, you do not want to put in something that gets 76% of its responses as so, maybe this helps because it'll make your clients lose faith in you. People are already skeptical of AI. And again, we have to treat it at its worst in the hopes that it will get better. So we have ways to improve it, but that's the truth. But again, we can start to look at the time frame. So I can say, how did we do in the last, 30 days? Did this get better? Did this get worse? And we can start to look at those going like, yeah, in the last 30 days, the chats did get better. So we start to visualize growth, better RPS scores. In my case, no, they're not. But this is the general case of how it gets better and better over time. So then, again, with 10 minutes on the clock, we get to analytics, which I'll show a little bit of, and then we'll cut out the webinar. But any questions thus far, Crystal? Probably not. I'm guessing.
There was one, but we can wait till the end.
Okay, I'll give you probably like 5 more minutes of explanation because this next bit is pretty much the same thing, rinse and repeat across everything else. So you've seen the answer to what does triage do? Triage kind of tees it up for us, sets up a good expectation so we can answer the question better. It's optional, right? Even if it's not supported by your PSA, or we don't support it, rather, it's not critical. And again, a lot of times you have built-in stuff that can probably get us similar. They can rename stuff and get us good data. The article and documentation and ticket history is for that technician assistance. It's to make the AI smarter so the AI can help work through a problem. There's a little bit of more nuance there, but again, I'll save that for a different webinar just because there's even a toggle to interpret prompts differently from whether they're answering a user specifically or whether you want to kind of change it to be more coaching. So I'll do one really quickly that I do a lot when I show people the example of it, and then I'll move on to reporting. But if I say something like, how do I fix my Outlook? The first response that I've even been doing this whole time is interpreting a prompt as if it is the AI to the user referencing what it has available. Ta-da. If I flip the switch, what it's going to do is it's going to evaluate the prompt as if it's assisting a technician. Now, if you're actually working in a pod, this is how it's going to work. Why? Because what we're doing now is we're coaching that technician to get the right information. The AI is just thinking like it's buddy and just saying, I could help you solve the Outlook issue, right? If it's a user, I don't have the benefit of coaching. I don't want to annoy them. A user gets an answer saying, sorry, your Outlook's broken, right? Let's look at it one more time. It's just going to go, restart it, try this, put in a ticket, whatever, because you're testing literally AI to user. So you see it, check your internet, restart your Outlook, try running it in safe mode. A technician doesn't need that. A technician needs a buddy to tell them what to work on. So again, we switch the response and it says, are they unable? Are they seeing error messages? What version are they working? And the more the technician treats it again like a chat GPT, feeds it questions, the more the AI helps them answer it. And again, it helps them work through problems. So you can see that it's not as simple or as whatever as putting in an AI in a chat bot and going, figure it out. There are different types of responses, different considerations that we're kind of going down to make this useful. So when we're talking about like how it behaves inside of a pod or an insights panel or whatever, it's specifically going to look at that in terms of an agent, or at least that's what we really want. And we have ramifications for that in the future. So a brief note about reporting. So again, we've seen the triage, we've seen how it helps technicians. When we start getting into reporting, I did a webinar on this last week or the week before, now I can't remember, but it's how to break down data more and more. So the cool thing about AI is that it's not good at a lot of stuff, but one of the things it's really good at is pattern recognition across ways that humans can't keep up with. So if I come into the ticket grid, for example, this is the tickets we've imported. I have my little Orion assistant over here, and what's happening is it's like a plain text search on your information. So you're asking the AI to interpret stuff. So if I say, what's the most recent ticket trends, right? What's been happening out in the field? Show me. It'll start telling you like, oh, we're seeing a lot of whatever type of tickets. Now, again, mine are all fake, but in real life cases, I do this a lot, right? Where I say like, hey, a lot of people are doing their out of offices. What's going on with that? Well, 24 days to close that ticket's not great. So you can start to ask it for trends. You can start to ask it for what requires my attention, which tickets have bad CSATs, right? Which ones are, yeah, mine's going to be freaking out, but which tickets in general require your attention and which tickets, have technicians that are kind of not putting in the best notes. So having the ability to look at everything conceptually really fixes this. We talk about this even during, like if you get an actual demo of it, people do this a lot with like the tech. So if I pick a specific tech, and I did one on a webinar specifically on this the other week, is like I look at Tevin as a technician and same scores, right? That RPS thing is pervasive. How are Tevin's notes? How's Tevin doing as a technician? How are the people Tevin deals with? Where are his strengths and weaknesses? Specifically, how do we look at his responses? So part of this is not just helping the tech get to the answer fast as possible with an AI answer, but slowing down actually and evaluating, is he doing a good job? Is he actually communicating properly? Does he ask the right questions? Show me the examples, right? So we can ask it to pull up the tickets where he did really well or needed coaching. And we can kind of take its estimations of how that was going and use that in real life. Again, in a way that you probably don't have time as a service desk manager to sit with everybody and learn them. Where I think this is really interesting is where it goes to like company-wide view. And again, mine's going to be pretty lame. But what's happening is if I look at like Azure Tech launch or the Azure Tech here, right? I'm now looking at the profile of a company I support. So I can now see who's putting in the tickets. When are they putting in the tickets? What's their ticket note quality look like? How are our technicians doing with them? Are their users prickly, right? So I can see everything from the tickets to any articles that we have specific to them to who is the power user, right? For user RPSs, I can see, for example, in this case, that this guy, I don't know who this clown is, Ricky, but he's got a terrible user RPS, meaning he's a problem guy. He's probably short with us. So it's both an offensive tool that we can use to help our techs, but also a defensive one where you can kind of proactively spot issues that are really hard to spot internally. So you can kind of look through a page like this, but you can also even ask it to give you a proper analysis. So if I ask it to generate a report of what's actually going on with this company, and I can see like stuff like what are the root causes of their issues? What are the products causing them the most pain? So in this case, we get a lot of tickets for these people asking us how to do stuff. We could get better documentation, or there's a lot of malfunctions with their Outlook crashes because I use that example literally every time I demo this. This is not a cool party trick. This is the basis of how AI works. It's looking at a huge set of data and giving you the most recent trends across whatever timeline you want. Again, what's the root cause? Well, in this case, we have some issues with our smart forms, or what products causes the most issues? Microsoft Office. Show me the Office issues. Starting to visualize the data like this means that you have a tool that, again, not only triages stuff, not only helps the techs get their answers better, but also starts to give you some really interesting analytics company by company across the entire desk. That's what the AI analysis area does. So how do you fix systemic issues all the way down to what does it recommend specifically that would make the biggest difference? So again, self-servicing would be really good because in this case, we put a lot of examples that could be fixed with self-services, or automated troubleshooting for password resets because we got a bunch of those. So figuring out not just the numbers and the data in, data out, but what is the most productive change is another core part of it. So long story short, we have those three use cases and they all come into play. But people come to the onboardings and I ask them all the time, I said, which one of these intrigues you? And generally it's all three, but sometimes it's I really want visibility, or I really want to help my new techs get trained because it takes them way too long to figure out what's going on. And we kind of iterate on that. So let's get the tech using this tool, feedback, getting their answers, seeing how they like it, improving them. Or let me show you how to set up these reports. And here's what to monitor. Here's the number to look at. So stuff like that is generally how you figure out your AI strategy in a nutshell. There we go. Crystal, I left you 2.5 minutes probably. That's generous for me, I feel.
Yes, it is. Thank you. Good thing that we only have a couple of questions. So the first one from
Hmm.
Ryan, is Kaseya BMS on the roadmap? And if so, is there an ETA?
BMS works already, so that one's is good to go. I don't have a
Okay.
way to show it, but because I'm already hooked up to ConnectWise. Now, BMS doesn't have triage, but as far as the hookup of data, pulling it in, getting the scores, and giving the assistance, again, I don't know if BMS has the same stuff. I don't think it does, where I can pull in like pods like this. This is what I was talking about as my annoyance, because I want to give every PSA this experience specifically. Some of them just don't have it. So for tools, I know I work with some synchro people. They have to side screen it, and it works fine. They can just feed it numbers. That's about the experience if you're trying to get the tech assistance. Not a huge deal. It's not what I want, but that's what we got. But BMS works already, so for sure.
Okay, awesome. All right. Not sure who asked this one, but so there are other tools on the market.
Mhm.
Right. So ConnectWise just announced they bought a company, MSP Bots, you know about them. What makes us stand apart from the others in the industry?
That's a great question. I love that question because we have a plan on what to do besides having AI thrown around. And in this case, our forte is we came from the client portal. So our strategy is not just to go, we triage stuff. We have ChatGPT. You can buy ChatGPT. You don't need this. What we're doing is we are interconnecting our chat tool, our Service AI tool, and our client portal to really make this thing smart. So if Service AI, because obviously this whole thing's been about Service AI, is the brain behind it, where it's taking into account your information, your rule sets, your technicians, or whatever, we can feed that into our chat product. That chat product now starts to recognize, it doesn't do it yet. I want to be crystal clear. This is what we're building. This is the interconnection. We have this feeding to a chatbot that understands who it's talking to, what resources they have available, what you've interacted with them before. That's much smarter. And the connection to the client portal means that we don't have to just stick to tickets and links and boring stuff. We can start to give users things like courses, things like reports. We can have them access a UI that they actually want to access to get into, hey, here's your QBR stuff. Or like instead of asking my Outlook is broken and just saying, check this article or let me run this automation, you can say, why don't you hit this up and check out your PDF that you have in your portal? Let me boost that up in there. Or instead of putting in a ticket, it can look and say, hey, there's an outage. It says it in your portal. Did you know that? Let me give you a link to that. So our shtick, our big picture is not just that it exists as a standalone tool, but we have this as part of our client portfolio. So a lot of times when I do these webinars, I do like a little triangle to say like our goal is to make this tech good, but our real power is to interconnect it. And I think that the strength that we bring to the table that nobody else does that I can see is that because we started client first, we will circle back and do client more than anything else. And if you do this standalone, you're going to get replaced by a generic AI. I promise you. The whole shtick here is, again, you have to have a bigger vision than just we put Chat GPT in a ticket, which is what we're trying to do. So I love that question because that was the first thing we asked ourselves going, why do we care? We are not owned by Kaseya or ConnectWise, so we have no incentive to put AI. So is it gimmick tech or is it real? And again, it can be really powerful if you have the actual ecosystem around it. So that's my 2 cents.
That was a great answer. Thank you for that. I think that's all the questions I see on my side. Y'all have asked some great questions today. So yeah, that's all for me.
Sweet. Thank you guys. Again, a lot of stuff's coming out for this. We have a lot of changes coming that I didn't talk about because it might bore a lot of people. But one of the things I will say that I just saw is we actually just added this sweet new getting started checklist, which is nice. I will say Service AI as a whole, out of every product we have, is probably the easiest to set up with, which is really cool because you kind of set it, let it build, and then go from there. So uh, I'm working on getting a lot of these things, best practices from everything from best practice prompts to best practice triage rules to here's the most important set of articles you want to drop in there. So not only do we have all this stuff, but I'm working on making it a really nice experience to level up your AI and really get out there. So thank you for your time. Again, keep tabs on us. We'll make this better and better, and I'll catch you for the next one. Thanks, everybody. And thank you, Crystal.